Hi, everyone. My name is Colin Lowenberg. Thank you guys for joining. Let's give a second for everybody to join our meeting. So we've got quite a few people joining in today. We've already got a few participants. Thank you for joining us. Hi, everyone. And good morning if you're on Pacific time. I'm Colin Lowenberg. I'm a technical product marketing manager for Sumo Logic. I wore a shiny jacket, hopefully to help you wake up this morning. If you're not familiar with Sumo Logic, we are a cloud managed logging service and continuous intelligence platform. What that means is that we collect logs, metrics, and traces from all of our customers, and then provide a platform for them to create business-like intelligence from that log data. And we're very well used within cloud native companies, as well as companies that are still in the migration from on-premise to cloud. So it doesn't matter where you are in your journey to the cloud, you can send your logs, metrics, and traces to the Sumo Logic platform, and then you can generate amazing dashboards and collect insights and important information from those logs. So some major companies that you might have heard of, a few of my favorite airlines like United and Delta, they are still in that cloud migration process. They've still got on-premise, but they've been moving to the cloud for many years, as well as those cloud native companies like Airbnb and Netflix. Those are a wide range of more than 2,000 customers. So we ingest quite a bit of data every single day from thousands of customers. And those customers then rely on us not just to store those logs, but to also understand the real use case for storing logs. Collecting logs in the first place is not really just about having some information that you can search back in when something goes wrong, but rather to proactively detect and investigate issues in your software. And the customer experience that your end customers are experiencing, whether those are internal customers like your employees or they're external customers that you're serving an application to, they rely on the availability, the performance, and security of the applications that they're using. All of those are different types of or functions of reliability. And so what we're really providing at Sumo Logic is a platform for customers, our customers, to measure and monitor the reliability of your software and your applications and your environment in order to better that customer experience. So we call this observability, this act of collecting data on reliability, whether that's availability or performance or security. We collect all of that information and provide it in a single pane of glass dashboard. Now, how do we do that? Well, one of the main use cases that we're going to focus on today is troubleshooting an issue in an application from end to end. And typically when you have, if you've worked in IT, you know that there's some monitoring stage where you're monitoring the logs or you're monitoring whatever output from your application to see if there's an issue and alert on those issues. And then you diagnose the issue. And so you may go into triage, and then eventually you'll start troubleshooting, trying to resolve the issue, find the root cause and resolve it. So we're going to really focus a lot on all three of these stages, but we're going to dive a lot into the troubleshooting stage and sort of dive deep into the logs and try to find the root cause of an actual issue. So now, how do we get that data? How do we actually accomplish this monitoring and diagnosing and troubleshooting? Well, we can take data from any number of applications, whether you have a containerized modern application stack that might run on Kubernetes and AWS, you can pull that in. Or if it's your CI/CD DevOps dev environment, we can pull that data in and provide software development flow in your business intelligence, in your continuous intelligence platform. Of course, any software that you have typically has a log or a trace or a metric. We also collect metadata, and that metadata you'll see allows us to create a hierarchical structure within our dashboards. So beyond just the logs, metrics, and traces, we're doing a little bit more by organizing all that information and providing context using metadata. So we're going to use all that data to monitor, diagnose, and troubleshoot. And these three different layers are going to be demonstrated in our live demo today. So rather than continue with the slides, I want to jump right into the live demo. And before we show you the live demo, I want to set up a sort of structure for what application we built to demo for you. So in order to do this live demo today, we needed an application other than Sumo Logic to actually have an issue with and then resolve. So we went and built a little application that has a payment service and an account service. And it runs on AWS and Kubernetes, and it's built in Java. It's all coded in Java, and we have multiple pods in our deployment across an east and west load balanced deployment. We have an RDS database behind it all, providing the SQL service to an account service, checking those accounts in the RDS database to see if they have funding. And we have a payment service that calls on that deployment and calls that account service. So now that you kind of have a feel for this is the application that we're going to be talking about today, maybe it's similar to one of your applications. Maybe you have a payment application in your existing stack that you support. So one of the ways that I'm going to jump right into the Sumo Logic dashboard, but in order to do the monitoring portion, the most common way to monitor an application today often is via email. You can also use PagerDuty or any other number of our integrations. We have hundreds of apps that we integrate with to provide alerts to, but you can see right here, this is my Gmail email that we use for Sumo Logic. And you can see right here, we have a monitor alert. We have a critical payment service. Our service level objective, or SLO, is over 5%. So that basically we're saying if we have an issue in the last 10 minutes, send an email and we've detected this alert. So the payment service has been breached. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that alert. And that's going to take me to the Sumo Logic dashboard. And it will take me right to this page, the payment service error, SLO. And let's see, give it a second. Oh, scroll down. So you can see right here, we have in the last 35 minutes, our error rate has reached 30%. That's well above our threshold. And so we've color coded this tile right here to give us a red error. So this makes it really clear that there is an error rate that's too high. So we're seeing too many errors in the last 10 minutes. But you want to see this visually. So you could also do this as a bar chart. And you see we have quite a bit of alerts right here, but you also want to see this over time. So what we've done is we've actually graphed out our error rate over time. So you can see as the error rate increased at 9:11 a.m., you can see it jumps up quite a bit to right around 22 or 30. It goes from, let's see, under 1% to 30% to 20 something percent. So it's quite a big jump right here. And you can see it holds steady for a few minutes. And you also see this red line right here. This red line right here is our threshold. Anytime that an error goes beyond a threshold, we consider it an outlier. So these dots right here are error rate outliers. And this way you can see and you can identify exactly when the issue began to occur. It looks like it began to occur around 9:10, 9:11 a.m. And then as that error rate increases, that threshold now readjusts to a new baseline. So this is automatically done in our outlier graphs. So you can essentially create an outlier graph automatically from your error rates, and it automatically baselines your errors based on the current existing number of errors per minute or per hour. Now, when we have an issue, we want to know when it's occurring. That's great. We also want to know a little bit more about how that error or how that issue is affecting our customers, right? So in that email, it just told us, hey, you're over 5%. We know that there's an issue. We come to this page, we see it's 30%. So we know it's significant, but we don't really know what the severity of the issue is. So how do we identify the severity? Well, one of the best ways to look at severity is look at your customer impact. So how is this actually affecting my customers? Well, in this case, we built the customer impact dashboard for this error. And we can see which customers are actually being affected in here. So I can see I've got 8 customers affected, and I can see the number of errors affecting those customers. So now I know I can tell my support team to reach out proactively, check on these customers, perhaps let them know that we're experiencing some technical issues, or ask them if they're experiencing issues on their end. Now, we can also identify those errors right here. You can see right here, connection refused error. And this was sort of a very quick and easy way to find the issue. We're going to show you how to find that in the logs without this very simple, easy to find new error signatures. But this gives you a quick dive into the most recent errors that are triggering this outlier and triggering this SLO violation. Another way we want to look at the severity of an issue or the priority of an issue is how it's affecting our business, right? So our customers are important, but also our bottom line. So this is a payment application. So if nobody's able to use the payment application, we're not making money. So you can see our transaction volume right here dropped significantly from somewhere in the hundreds of transactions per minute to below 10 transactions per minute. So that's pretty significant, as well as the dollars transferred. We went from making tens of thousands of dollars every minute to we're now making under $2,000 a minute. So this is a pretty significant issue, not something that we can ignore and bring to a meeting. It's something that I, as the site reliability engineer or the on-call engineer, I need to resolve or at least investigate and find out the issue. Now, one way to get the health of my overall overall infrastructure is one of these honeycomb graphs. These honeycomb graphs display all of the pods in my payment service deployment. So I can see some are red and some are green. So this actually tells me that the error rate is relatively high on some of these. So the red ones are, I see this one has an error rate of 50, whereas the green one's error rate of 0. So it doesn't look like this issue is consistent across every pod, but it is across a lot of pods. So we know this is not something that is isolated to just one customer or isolated to just one pod. So in order to dive a little deeper, I'm going to go ahead and click on one of these pods. And when I click on that pod, I get a nice, useful feature on the right side. I get the summary dashboard. And it lets me jump right into the logs or the error logs. Also shows me if there's any dashboards for that infrastructure that maybe I wanted to set up before. Now, if I don't have dashboards already set up, I can actually click on the infrastructure tab and I can actually look at pre-manufactured dashboards that we've created automatically based on the metadata from the pod. So we can look at the payment service container, we can look at the environment, and we can look at the deployment. Now, just logically, we see a lot of pods are having a problem. So this is not a per pod problem. So let's look at the whole deployment. So I want to look at my infrastructure dashboard for the entire deployment. And I can see I want to open this deployment and I want to open it, click open in. And now I get some options. I can open the entity dashboard. So our entity model allows you to see these different this hierarchical structure. So I'm going to show you the entity dashboard first, but also you see we have these options for log search, traces, and metrics. So we can kind of jump into whatever kind of view I feel most comfortable with. Let's start with the entity dashboard. When I open the entity dashboard, this is actually a pre-manufactured out-of-the-box dashboard. This comes with our product for Kubernetes, and this is our Kubernetes deployment view. So because we built this application on Kubernetes and then integrated Kubernetes with our Sumo Logic cloud, now Sumo Logic automatically uses the metadata, metrics, and traces and pulls it in. So I can see all the pods in my deployment already structured in this hierarchical tree structure on the left. I can see we've got the account service, we've got the payment service, and we can also see I've got different dev systems and default systems on here. I've also got a different application that I'm not looking at, the coffee bar. So I want to focus on that payment service deployment. And I can see when I look here, I see there's 100 connection errors, 100,000 connection errors, quite a bit. We also created a nice little graph here, green, yellow, red, and we are clearly in the red here. I see some pods are offline, but that's normal with Kubernetes to have some pods go down. They don't need to be online all the time. But I also see right here connection errors. I see there's two types of errors we're seeing. One's connection refused, and there's a lot of those. I can also see that in a bar chart. So there's a lot of ways to slice and dice your data in this dashboard. Because this is an out-of-the-box dashboard, we basically built in all the different views. So if there's a lot of different errors, maybe a table would not be the right way. Maybe a bar chart would be a better way. As well, you can scroll down, you can see the pods over time, and you can see the CPU usage and the health. So this is useful to look at all the other KPIs of my deployment. Now, in this case, I don't see any major memory spikes or CPU spikes right here. So I'm not going to be looking at that. I'm going to focus on those connection errors. And if I click on the connection errors, I can click here, I can click here. It pulls up that same right side tab. I see a summary. I can jump into the logs again. There's no dashboards that are linked to this. So I'm going to go to my infrastructure tab again. And now I really just want to look at these errors at this specific time. So I don't really know exactly what time and what piece of code caused these errors. So actually what I want to do, but I do know that this is the account service talking to the payment service. So you see, we're in the payment service deployment, trying to talk to the account service and getting refused. So we know these two services that I showed you in the application, they're not talking to each other very well. So let's take a look at traces. If you're not familiar with traces, traces are a way to look at the entire transaction that occurs for a single user or a single action within your software. And traces are sent, transaction traces are sent to Sumo Logic Cloud and then displayed in a graphical format. So when I click on the traces for this specific container at this specific time, I can see all of the transactions that are occurring on my payment service at that time. So you can see all the timestamps are all from this 1 minute period that aligns with when the issue is occurring. I can also see which service we're talking about, the payment service right here. And you can see the root operation. It's payment service transacting to, probably transacting to that account service. Now I can filter here as well. I can say I only want number of errors equal to or greater than let's say 5. So I can filter this list to just those transaction traces that have errors in them. I'm just going to pick the first one here. There's a lot of traces. They may be the same issue, but they all look relatively similar in color. What that means, these colors over here indicate which service is actually being recorded in that trace. So both the account service and the payment service are in this trace. Now, when I click on this, I'm now in the span view of the transaction trace. So the span view lets me see all of the different steps that are happening in my software. And this is obviously, you might question, how did we get this information? Well, because we use Kubernetes and we use the modern application framework, that information is relatively easy to capture. So we support OpenTelemetry and a lot of other different frameworks for sending tracing information to the Sumo Logic Cloud. In this case, we're using a Java-based Kubernetes application and OpenTelemetry. So this is automatically built into the framework of our application. And we're looking for errors. Fortunately, all of the errors have a nice red line at the top of them. So all of these are leading up to an error. And you can see an HTTP GET from the payment service right here in yellow, calling to our accounts service in red. Now it's not, the red is just a color coding of that service. And we can see it leads up to this find by ID command in the software. And we're not really sure what that, it's account finding an ID number. So let's click on that. And now we can see, we can open the logs specifically for that. We can also go to that infrastructure page again, and we can look at that specific container. So we can look at the logs there. We can also look at the metadata for this and see how, exactly which pod this is linked to. And we can, let's go ahead and jump into the specific logs for this container. So I'm going to pull up the log search for this. And now we're getting into the logs that are specifically for the account service. that are talking to the payment service. And we see, even though we're looking at this very small one single container, if you see up in our query at the top, you can see we're looking at just one specific pod, and we're looking at the container for the account service now. Now, we have 119 pages of logs. It's quite a bit of logs. It's actually almost 3,000 logs. So we need some way to sort of collapse this down to something that's a little bit easier to work with. We can scroll through and look at all of these logs. Each one of these, it's not really giving me a lot of information, but let's click log reduce. Log reduce is a button that we've provided automatically to simplify your log view. So log reduce uses machine learning to do pattern matching. And what that pattern matching does is it finds all the logs that have very similar patterns within them. So you can see we're taking out some of the timestamps and some of the information to identify which logs are most common. And you can see we've got right here a nice clear error that says JDBC connection exception, unable to acquire JDBC connection with root cause. We show too many connections. So we have a little root cause explanation right here. There's too many connections between the account service and the payment service. Great. That's useful. It tells us that we probably need to increase the number of connections allowed. We're getting a very clear root cause error right here. And it was relatively easy to get to. So we've got the root cause, end of story. We can say we're done. Except not quite. This is not the real root cause. This is the sort of remedial root cause. I could go back, I can increase the number of connections on my SQL RDS database and say, okay, let's increase the number of connections allowed for JDBC. And sure, that might solve the problem, but it doesn't really show the root cause. Why are there too many connections connecting to our RDS database? So now I know that it's related to the RDS database. I want to investigate my RDS database. So we want to look for the true root cause. So fortunately, Sumo Logic has created a new feature called the Root Cause Explorer. The Root Cause Explorer, I simply open up and it automatically pulls in all of the data from my AWS infrastructure. So this is actually across my entire AWS infrastructure, and I can choose different namespaces. So I can look at my RDS database, I can look at my Lambda service, so I can pull up my different services. Now I know I only want to look at RDS, but before I filter it down, you can see on this graph, this visual graph, these little bubbles, these little circles. Each one of these circles represents a metric. So rather than looking at logs or traces, now we're looking at the metrics. Now, if a metric goes beyond its threshold, if you remember that error rate outlier, if we have an outlier in our metrics, it's displayed here in the Root Cause Explorer. So the Root Cause Explorer helps us find the outliers in metrics. So if I hover over one of these, I can see there's a high number of errors on Lambda, but I want to focus on just RDS. And I'm looking at the last 24 hours now. So I can see there's an RDS bottleneck right here. And right at the very top of this, the highest to the top right is probably the most important because it's the most recent and it's also the most out of line with the baseline. So I can see the drift here, the outliers over 10,000% for 30 minutes. So we see a very high load on our RDS database around the same time. And we're also seeing that this is the network receive throughput. We're also seeing RDS load here on IOPS, and we're also seeing quite a bit of load on the disk queue depth. And when I click on these circles on the right, I can actually see the metric that is out of line. So I can see that metric on the right. So I click on this, I can see RDS load. Looks like RDS load is a little bit high. We can see the bottleneck for disk queue is quite high. And then we also see the throughput is also quite high. So what we're looking at here is we're identifying the time that the RDS database is having an issue. And then we want to inspect that a little bit more. So let's do an inspection of all the logs at the time that this RDS issue is happening. So I'm going to click on all logs. And this does a drill down from that Root Cause Explorer right to our logs. So this is the same view we were looking at before for the account service, talking to the payment service, but now we're looking at the RDS database. Now, we wouldn't have known to jump right into the RDS database. We saw that it said too many connections. So maybe that would lead us to just jump right to the RDS database. We know that it's an issue with RDS. So we came here to find the real root cause, which is causing the too many connections. Now, if I scroll through this, there's only 6 pages here. So and all the logs look relatively similar. And if you look at them, it's very clear that these are slow queries. So we have an alert to detect when a query runs for too many seconds, and alerts on that. And you can actually see the exact query that's running in here. See update inventory where quantity is 50, add 100 to the quantity. We also see another query right here. It's a different query selecting ID and name from inventory. So maybe the inventory queries, maybe the inventory table is going slow. Maybe it's overloaded. Maybe there's something we can do to optimize that table, or just optimize these queries. So now we know that there's an issue with these queries. Now, I might not be the developer on the team, so I still need some help. I'll take this information, send it to our dev team, request that they try to fix these queries and speed up our application, which should stop the too many connections. Now, I found the issue. I've gone from a remedial root cause to a true root cause. And I've done that by using our root cause explorer. I've used traces to identify the issue between 2 services. And I've used the metrics on the root cause explorer to identify issues occurring. So now issue solved, right? Well, not quite. My dev team might not be able to resolve all of these errors on my RDS database that might be affecting it, right? So just because they solve one slow query might not solve the issue immediately overnight. I need to get my customers back up and working. So I'll increase those connections on the RDS database, but I also want to, detect this and prevent the same issue from happening in the future. So what I can do is I can actually go into Sumo Logic's alert system and create a new alert to detect whenever this issue is occurring. Now, this is something that if you read the Google SRE book, half of your time should be spent solving issues and fixing bugs. The other half should be improving your system to prevent and predict those issues. So how do we improve our system? How do we improve Sumo Logic as a tool to prevent this issue from occurring again? So what we've done is we've created a predict slow query time alert. And this actually will monitor the logs. We could also monitor the metrics if we wanted. But in this case, we're going to monitor the logs for that slow query. So anytime a query time is over, for an hour, we detect that slow query time. If we have more than 10 slow queries in a 5-minute period, then send us an alert. And I'll even write an email to myself. So send an email to Colin and the other SRE, Ulf, and I'll say, hey, we predict these slow queries are going to be too slow. It's going to cause a CPU spike and connection refused errors, and you're going to see too many connections in the logs. So I'm literally talking to my future self saying, hey, the issue is about to occur again. Resolve this issue, alert the dev team to fix the queries, and increase the number of connections allowed. So I've got that new predict slow query time. Maybe I want to adjust my payment service error as well in here, and I've resolved the issue from my standpoint as an SRE. I now have the information automatically sent to me anytime that there's an issue, which saves me quite a bit of headache in the future. So I just want to say thank you guys for listening to me present. I really enjoyed. We're at the half hour. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to go through your questions now. I don't see any Q&A. If you want to click and raise your hand or click and ask a question in the Q&A, I'm happy to dive in a little bit deeper. You can also start a free trial on our website, sumologic.com, and you can sign up for a free trial. And you can join us on Slack, slack.sumologic.com, to chat with us as well. I think there's actually a channel focused on end-to-end observability. So if you want more information about end-to-end observability or troubleshooting with Sumo Logic, you can find more on the website. Also, there's a recorded version of this demo on YouTube that's about 5 minutes long. So if you want the really quick version of this to share with your boss or colleagues, you can find a copy of me talking online on YouTube. Thank you guys for joining. Feel free to ask questions.